Hello guys, welcome back to Step by Step with me, Shelby Church. I want to thank you guys first of all for all the feedback on the first episode. Everyone in the YouTube comments seemed very excited, and that made me so excited because I wasn't sure. Sometimes I'm like, okay, do people actually want to listen to me yap for 40 minutes? I don't know. But I'm really happy that we're down for it because I love podcasts. Really quickly wanted to hop in here while I'm editing to give an update on the fire in LA because I've gotten a lot of comments asking if I'm okay and what's going on there. And I am okay. I decided to drive to Palm Springs to get out of the smoke. I don't live close to the fire, and honestly, I feel like there's no way it could reach me. If it reached me, the whole city of LA would have to burn down. And these wildfires, they typically stay in the hills where there's a lot of brush. And I do kind of want to touch on a little bit about the fire because I feel like I have some thoughts on it, because this is not the first time I've experienced fire evacuations and everything in California. I used to live close to the base of Bel Air. And it was Westwood technically. So it's the base of the hills, if you're not familiar with LA. And that area would catch on fire every year, 3 years in a row, like clockwork. This year, I think the reason that it is so bad is because we had a ton of rain last year. We had all this new growth. I'd never seen LA become so green. And I haven't seen anyone talk about this with regards to the fire. There was just so much more plants in the hills, natural brush that grows that is not normally there. It's normally a lot more just dead. And so it was unfortunately kind of the perfect storm for a terrible, terrible fire. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. A lot of people are making it political, and it's just honestly terrible. I will say where the biggest fire is in the Palisades. And if you're not familiar with LA, it's a very nice ritzy area. I guess it's basically completely gone, which is really sad because even if you didn't live there, like I couldn't afford to live there. You need at least $5 million to live there, like minimum, basically, I would say. But I had just actually last weekend gone and played tennis there with some friends. It had been on my list of things to do in LA for a long time because it's a really out of the way kind of place. Actually, like if you don't live in the Palisades, you probably never go over there. Yeah, I was thinking, wow, this is so nice. Need to do this more. We played tennis. We went to the Palisades Village after and got brunch, and now that whole area is burned. So it's unfortunate, and it does make me think, if there's something you want to do, you never know when you might not have the chance to again. And this is just on a deeper level, like with people, with things. I mean, obviously it's unlikely in most cases, but I am just so glad that we actually got to have that one last experience playing tennis in the Palisades. And I feel for all the people that lost their homes. I know a lot of people on TikTok are very much like eat the rich, and I will say, not everyone involved in these fires is super rich. So it's really sad. And I hate seeing it all get so political, like immediately. Oh my God, it's just driving me crazy. I mean, the truth of fires in California is they've been happening since before people even settled in California. Like Malibu has caught on fire for the last 40 plus years. I wouldn't say it's normal. It's still unusual, but it's not abnormal just because LA gets so dry. The weird thing, a lot of people point to global warming, and I won't really get into that, but the weird thing is it is not hot in LA right now. It is really cold at night, actually, 50 degrees, and the fire started at night. So I don't think it has as much to do with heat as the winds. So if any sort of fire starts when it's that windy, regardless of the area, it's going to be, awful. And LA, unlike the East Coast, does not get as much variance in our weather from day to day or hour to hour. Like if you go to the East Coast, it'll just start raining for 20 minutes every day randomly. So any wildfire will be put out a lot quicker. In LA, it will not rain for 20 days in a row or months in a row. That's a little bit of an update on the fires from somebody who lives in LA, and I really hope it all gets contained soon because, I mean, obviously it's horrible, all the destruction, all the damage. There's more consequences than even just the people's homes. Everyone's home insurance will go up. High schools burned down, all this infrastructure, public infrastructure, not just, a lot of people like to be like, oh, it's rich people's homes. No, it's literally a high school, grocery store, a library, these places that everyone could use. So it is really unfortunate. ultimately why I decided to leave. I didn't need to evacuate. I'm sure I could have stayed and my place would not have burned down based on where I was. Like, I know pretty much for a fact. There's just no way. The reason I left, the air quality was horrible. There were I had to move my car. The 5 minutes I was outside, my throat started hurting and in my apartment, and I was like, okay, I'm not risking it. I'm getting out of here. Like, there's so much stuff in the air. I've never been this close to this big of a fire, and I'm so fortunate to be able to go to Palm Springs. I can't go to the Rocket Club Resort. It is booked, but my parents are here and they let me stay, and I also am sick and have a fever, but it's a weird day. We're getting through it, and let's get back into the episode. Today we're going to talk about flow state. If you don't know what that is, by the end of this, you're going to know, and why I think it's important. I'm talking about it today because when you're more aware of it, you can bring more of it into your life, and I feel like it just makes me so much happier when I'm intentional about bringing more flow state into my life. But before we get into it, want to remind you guys, if you enjoyed the first episode back, to rate the podcast 5 stars if you like it. It really does help me out. Really, any podcast you listen to, it helps the podcaster out a lot if you rate it 5 stars. That's pretty much how new people find the podcast, I believe, is from the ratings and how it charts and such. If it has a lot of reviews, it's good for something. I don't know, but I forget, honestly. But I remember when we first launched Millennial Life Crisis, that was something that my manager at the time was like really big on, was getting ratings for it. So I know it's important. I don't remember exactly why, but yeah, just if you ever want to support your favorite podcasters or any podcast, rating it, a good rating does help. A bad rating, honestly, low-key might even help too. It's kind of like YouTube comments, I think, where even a negative comment is still engagement. I'm not sure if it works like that with podcasts, but that'd be kind of funny. But yeah, let's get into flow state. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, or follow if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's on there now. We're on there. If you're watching on YouTube, but you prefer to listen on Spotify or Apple, you can go subscribe on there. Funny thing, turns out most people listen on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Spotify is actually the smallest one. Isn't that surprising? I don't know why I assumed it was all Spotify. I think that's because where I mostly listen to podcasts. But let's get into flow state. I'm going to jump into it. You know, this is the beginning of this podcast, so I'm not going to fill it with ads and stuff. Like, I'm doing this for fun right now, and we're just going to get into it, because that's one pet peeve I have with the different podcasts, is they just take too long to get into the topic. Like, every time I click on a podcast, I'll kind of like skip to 7 or 8 minutes in, because I'm like, I kind of don't care about your weekend, you know, when people do a recap of that. I mean, if you guys do, you want me to talk about that, let me know, but I don't really care. I usually just want to get into the meat of the episode. So that's what we're going to do. So flow state, what is it? Flow state is very similar to being in the zone, very focused on an activity. It's basically when you are so focused on something that you forget about time itself. You forget about yourself. You're not thinking about anything except that activity. You're really living in the moment. It's a very enjoyable experience because, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I feel like it's hard to describe. Everyone has felt this before, and I think there's different kinds of flow state. There's like really peak flow state, and then there's everyday flow state, and that I kind of made that up, but the term flow state I did not make up. It's actually from a book I read. A psychologist whose name is Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, I hope I'm saying that right. He is the one who coined this term and really dedicated his life to studying flow state. Obviously, want to credit him there because I didn't make this up. There's been a lot of research on flow state throughout the years, and most of it was really pioneered by him. And it's sort of interesting to look into his background and what got him into flow state. He basically was born in what is now Croatia, but it was a war zone at that time. It was during World War II, and there was loss in his family. Obviously, it was turbulent. It was a war zone. And from what I read in the book and have read kind of about him as well, and there's also a talk he did on YouTube that I recommend. I'll put it in the show notes because it's really good. It's long. You can listen to it kind of like a podcast, but listen to this first and then go listen to that. Basically, it was a turbulent difficult time with loss, and it kind of made him, from what I understand, question the meaning of life. And like, you know, when there's a lot of difficult things, it does kind of make you think, like, why are we here if it's so sad? Basically, he spent years trying to figure out what makes life fulfilling, and he found that many people feel fulfilled when they're in flow. They feel happiest actually when they're in flow state. It's the opposite of what a lot of us think. We think that we're going to be happy when we achieve this goal in 30 years, when we retire, or when I hit 2 million subscribers or whatever. Actually, what happens when people achieve a goal, sometimes they feel a bit lost. Sometimes, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs sell a company and they describe feeling depressed after, at least for a period of time. And what really has been discovered by Mihail was that it's the journey. I know it's corny and a lot of people like have said that. It's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's because it really is the journey. It's the journey when you're in flow, because there are parts of the journey of your life that are not fun, that are stressful, that are difficult or boring. But when you're in flow, it's really the most enjoyable. And I've even noticed it in my life. If, for example, there will be periods of time where I'm really grinding on my videos, I'm working on them a lot, and I'm just like daydreaming about going to Palm Springs and laying by the pool doing nothing. And then I go and do that, I get there, and I'm like, oh, this is really boring. You know, like laying by the pool is actually only fun for a second. It's more fun in your mind, or the beach or whatever, a vacation. A lot of times a vacation, it's like the idea of it and the dopamine hit is more from the planning of it. And then you get there and it might actually be a little boring because, you know, drinking a margarita on the beach is only fun for so long. What is the most fun and fulfilling is being in flow state. And that is from, I mean, I'll get into it, you know, the types of flow state and everything, and like how I get into it in my life, ideas for you guys to bring more of it into your life, in your work, and also just in your personal life for fun. Basically, there's a couple different types of flow state, like I said, that I've said earlier, that I think that you can be in, and that is like peak flow and everyday flow state. And I don't think this was in the book. I think that I just kind of thought of this one day because I was like, okay, I feel like there's different levels to this, because peak flow, like the best flow state that's really described in Mihail's book, is high stakes activities like performing in front of a group of people, or for a sporting event, maybe you're participating in a band or something like that, when you have rehearsed it before. And these experiences, when you're in that flow state, it's almost like you're not even in your body anymore. Like I remember when I did gymnastics and going and doing my routine in front of a group of people, it was almost like I was watching myself do it. Like I was just so on autopilot, but so in the moment. I think these peak flow states are just more enhanced because you have adrenaline. Like if there's other people involved, if you're performing for a group of people, it's just more intense because of adrenaline, basically. So that is hard to get on the everyday, and honestly would be kind of a lot for every day. And then, you know, there's everyday flow state that can happen from doing creative tasks, writing, video editing, playing sports. I don't think working out as much as playing sports. You can kind of, I think it's different. Like going on a run, and I'll get into that later. I just think it's different. I don't think it's quite flow state, but sort of similar. But sports can you really get you into it. The everyday flow is very relaxing. It's joyful. It's fun. It just feels like play, you know, and it's really important to bring into our life for a couple of reasons. One, personal fulfillment. Like I said, it's fun. Hey, it's okay to just do things for the fun of it. We don't have to be productive all the damn time, you know? And I mean, tennis for me, you guys know, and I talked about that in the last episode. That's a big one. That is like my main source of flow state. I just find I get like the best flow state from that. But the other reason why flow state is important is it actually can boost your productivity. They have found, there's been research, it can boost it up to 500%. So that is like you're 5 times as more productive essentially when you're in flow. And I think that checks out. I think there are times where I'm not quite at 5 times as productive, you know, maybe I'm twice as productive, whatever. But when I'm really in the flow of video editing, it's like a compounding effect. I'm getting way more done. I'm doing a way better job than when I'm kind of half-assing it, you know? I'm getting hardly anything done when I'm being distracted, when I'm checking my email and then picking a song. I'm just not really in it. I'm just not nearly as productive as when I'm in that flow state. And then just the third reason it's important is just like happiness in general. I find that days that I'm in the most flow are the best days of my life. Like literally, it's like it doesn't really matter anything else. It doesn't matter if sometimes you're in flow like with a purpose, like towards achieving a goal, but sometimes it's just for the fun of it. When you're in flow, you're just living in the moment and really having fun, and it's just the best, honestly. So I want to talk about how to increase flow state. So a lot of this does come from the book that I read about flow, because this is the research on it, but I read this book a while ago and I've tested this stuff out and have kind of found ways to put it to work. So I'll kind of talk about that. So basically the first way they say to get into flow state is to have clear goals and immediate feedback. So you're not really going to get into flow state usually just like randomly. You kind of need to gamify things and you need to decide what you're gonna do. Because for me personally, sometimes I will have these days where I can't decide what to work on, and then I'll be working on something like editing, and then I'll be like thinking the whole time, oh, but I need to do this later. And that is not flow state. That is not what you want to do. You want to set a clear goal and just focus on that and give yourself permission to not think about the other task for a while. And flow state when it comes to work, also, this is kind of a side note, is going to be a lot more beneficial to people with a maker lifestyle than a manager lifestyle. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with those terms, but a maker is basically like software engineer, content creator, people making things, even like a contractor maybe, like people building things, making things. That is their form of work and the way that they're most productive. A manager is like a completely different type of work. It's like an agent, a talent agent, a real estate agent, a manager with it, a project manager, those types of jobs. You can't really put your phone on do not disturb, and the flow that you can get into is completely different. You can't really get into creative flow with those jobs. You kind of need to do that in your personal time because you're managing people, and it's just harder to get into flow with those jobs, I think, honestly. And like you kind of can in a conversation, a long conversation, maybe a brainstorming conversation, but it's just different. So I think if you have a maker type job or if you have free time, that's when you're going to get more into flow. But back to the clear goals and immediate feedback. Define the task that you're doing. So editing or cleaning or whatever, just decide. You don't necessarily have to write it down, but you kind of need to just pick something. And then you have to have a measurable outcome, kind of like a goal. So this is where sports are much, much better for getting into flow than something like running. And I'll give examples of how you can get immediate feedback. I don't mean that you need to like have feedback from a person. It's more of the feedback of if you're playing an instrument, you hear the note you hit, you hear if you hit it or not, you are making a song, you hear what it sounds like. That's the feedback. In tennis, it would be where the ball lands. Does it land in? Is it into the net? Is it out of bounds? That's the feedback. With running, I don't know what the feedback is. That's why I don't ever get into a flow state with running, because when I run, I'm daydreaming the whole time, and I don't think that's flow state. I think that, I feel good when I'm running because I'll have the endorphins and such, but I don't really think I'm in a flow because I'm not in the moment. I'm like thinking about other stuff the whole time, basically. And to me, the fun of it is listening to music and daydreaming, and it's just a little different than flow. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just don't think it's quite the same. So, there's other ways of getting into flow state, even like cleaning, for example. The feedback is how it looks once you've put an item away or moved it. You can see that clearly. If you didn't have any feedback, it's harder to get into flow. Even podcasting, I kind of feel like I get into flow, but there's not exactly feedback. So I do think it is a little bit different. So ideally, you want to gamify something. If there is no feedback, is there a way you can gamify it so that you can get feedback? Because I do think with running, you could decide to do sprints and time yourself and see if you can get the best time, or things like that. Even like a relay race, I feel like is kind of like a gamified way of doing it. Just there are different ways to get more into the flow state where you're actually in the moment of the activity. In general, for working out though, I think games are a lot better for it than just going to the gym and working out, unless you just like really set some clear goals and like see if you hit them or not. So that's one thing. So the next part of flow is accurately matching your skill level to what you're doing. So basically what they found in the book, they talk about this. If something is too easy, it's boring. And if it's too hard, it's stressful, essentially. And so you need to match your skill level so that it's slightly challenging, because that's when it's actually most fun. And I totally notice this with tennis. If I play with someone who's a complete beginner, it's really not fun for me. It's fun for me in a social way because I like getting my friends into tennis and like teaching them. It's kind of fun in the teaching aspect. But it is not a flow state like when I'm playing with someone who's a little bit better than me. That's my peak flow with tennis. That is so fun. Like, if it's people the same level, it's also fun, but it really is actually more fun with someone who's a little better than me, because they kind of make me rise to the occasion. Like, now I have to hit the shots faster, and it's like just exciting in a way. And even with video editing, I would say that can be fun if it's footage that I'm excited about. So I think video editing, when it's more challenging, it is just a little more stressful. But if I feel like I'm on the cusp of like a really cool edit, it is exciting and I'm more in the flow state than if I'm just editing a vlog or something like that. It's a little boring. So that's the thing. If you can match it, the skill level, to the challenge, even for example with cooking, that's a big one. People get in the flow state. If you never cook and you decide you're gonna cook something really complicated, you're probably just going to be overwhelmed and stressed out. It is actually better to start with something a little more simple, because you're gonna learn from it. It's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be fun. You're gonna get more into the flow state than if it's a meal that takes like 4 hours to cook. You go like braised short ribs or something that looks like time consuming like that, you know? So that's an important part, because like I said, you're either going to be bored or stressed if you're not in that sweet spot. And one thing I will say, when you are a beginner at something, it's harder to get into flow. Once you get a little better, it's much easier. So when I was a real beginner at tennis, I didn't really get into flow state like I do now. And I think it's the same thing if you're learning an instrument. You kind of got to put that time in to learn it before it gets really fun, right? So, and then taking it to the next level is doing flow in a group. That is like where you get that peak flow experience. If you play an instrument, playing in a band. Or I remember when I did orchestra in middle school, I played the viola. I don't think I've ever mentioned that on YouTube, but I remember it was actually so fun when the whole orchestra would play together. It was like just crazy, you know, to hear everyone on the same page. It's really cool when you can be in peak flow. The third thing when it comes to flow, and this is one that a lot of us really fuck up, and I did for a long time, and it is eliminating distractions. So you got to put your phone on do not disturb. I like to set timers. And one thing that they mention in flow research is it can actually take about 20 minutes to get into flow. There's like a ramp up period where you're not quite in it yet. I think for certain things you get in it faster. Like if I'm cleaning, after 5 minutes, I'm in flow. Like I'm like good to go, and I could do it for a couple hours probably. I could just keep cleaning. But for many things, it takes 20 minutes to really get into the flow where it's really fun. For video editing, it definitely does take a bit longer, because you have to set up the project, and you're not in the part where it's fun until you've kind of started it and you have something going. If I'm jumping into a project I've already started though, it is quicker. Like I can get into flow in like 5 or 10 minutes in that case. But if it's a project I haven't started, it takes like, 20 minutes about. And you have to put your phone on do not disturb. This is the biggest problem, and why people can't really get into flow these days is we have so many interruptions and notifications. And I've been really good about putting my phone on do not disturb at the beginning of the day when I most want to get into flow. I mean, think about if you went into a workout class, or if I went into a tennis class and I was checking my phone every 5 minutes, like it just takes you out of it. And yet when we're by ourselves, a lot of us allow ourselves to get those distractions, and you never truly get into flow. Like if I'm editing and I'm worried about getting an email, and I'm checking my email and whatever, like I'm just never really letting myself get into that flow state. And the 20-minute ramp up period is important to note too, because I used to do the Pomodoro technique more, which is where you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And I actually still do that sometimes, but I'll talk about specifically when a little later. But for flow, it's kind of contradictory. It's like, okay, you're taking a break right when you get into the flow of it, like you're messing it up. And I think the Pomodoro technique is still good in certain occasions, but not exactly when you want to get into deep flow state, right? So if you're really wanting to get into flow and optimize for flow, you have to do longer periods of time dedicated to a task. That's what I've learned, and that's what I've experimented with. So another part of it is actually scheduling when you want to get flow state for when you have the most energy in the day, because it's harder to get into flow state when you're tired. It just is, like, you're not in the mood for it, And so for me, I try to get my peak flow, like deep work and have fun with it, like video editing or filming, at the beginning of the day. Like from basically when I wake up, the first like three hours, I would say. And then later in the day is when I switch kind of to the Pomodoro technique and like do stuff that's like a little easier on my brain. And yeah, they say like you're going to be able to get into a deeper flow when you have the most energy. It makes sense. But if you're trying to get into flow with your work, for me, it's easier at the beginning of the day. But I'm also a morning person. So if you're a night owl, it might be easier at night. It's really when you have the most mental energy. And you kind of want to identify that and block off that time to be able to really get into something if you can. Because like I said, I know some jobs you can't just put your phone on do not disturb. But there are times where you can, like the weekend, the evening, maybe very early in the morning. But it's harder to with those types of jobs. I will acknowledge that. And then really the last thing is intrinsic motivation. If you are just doing something because you want to do it purely for that reason, not for money, it's going to be easier to get into flow. That is like what they've found from the research. And so when it comes to your personal life and hobbies and just getting into flow for the hell of it, just because you want to enjoy life more, pick things that you're intrinsically motivated to do. Don't do tennis if you don't like it. I mean, my sister loves golf and I'm sure she gets into a great flow state with that. But when you're doing these things, whether it's like drawing or painting or writing, just be sure to put your phone on do not disturb so you can like really get into that flow. Because I don't think I would really even quite get into the flow state with tennis if I was checking my phone while I was there. Okay, so I want to talk about more activities where you can experience flow. I've already mentioned a bunch, but there really is a lot more. I mean, obviously, for me, the big ones really are tennis, editing, and I would say even cooking, because I do that every day and I do get into a nice little flow with that where it feels very therapeutic and fun and I like look forward to it and I don't really do other things. Sometimes I will listen to stuff at the same time though. Okay, basically first one, big one is any type of sport. Skiing, volleyball. I do think I talked about this in the last episode, but there's all kinds of stuff, even like random little backyard activities like badminton, things like that. Really great for getting into flow, especially if you can do it with a group, because it's just going to be a more in the moment type of flow, like more fun. So anything like that, intramural sports, I don't know. I've been like hyping that the last year, like sports over like random workouts, even like snowboarding and stuff. I feel like you get immediate feedback with skiing and snowboarding because you see how you do. Like, are you still going? Are you falling? Are you going faster or slower? So that works. Even maybe like skateboarding, people do like tricks and stuff. Writing, I remember I read Shonda Rhimes' book years back. It's called Year of Yes. And she talks about how when she's writing, she calls it a hum that she experiences, like this relaxed state. And the hum to her is like basically flow state. It sounds like is what she's describing. And it's where like she just feels good, like she's in the moment doing that activity. And I think writing is a big one where you can experience flow. I know I do when I'm planning videos. Like it is fun and time goes by really fast. So even like journaling, you can experience flow state. If you're writing about something really boring, like this is where writing gets a bad rap, is because in school we have to write these essays about things that we oftentimes don't really care about. But when you're writing an article about an experience you've had, or like imagine you're writing an article for medium.com or like a newsletter, like learnings that you've had, it actually is really fun. So I would recommend that. It doesn't have to be for money or anything, but just in general, like if you want to write a book one day, like writing a few pages and just writing can be fun. Planning, all of that. Drawing, I know that my friend Lauren, she really gets into flow state from watercoloring. It doesn't do it for me. And like painting in general, not my thing, but I know a lot of people get into flow state from that. So I definitely want to mention that one. Also a random one, because there's a lot of unconventional types of flow that you can get into. Cookie decorating. My friend Lauren, who I'm going to have on the podcast, she is obsessed with decorating cookies and making this stuff called royal icing, where they actually let me go get one because she brought me some. I'll show you guys. So if you're watching the video podcast, you'll see this. This is one of the cookies that Lauren made. Like, that's actually really hard to make. She does it with royal icing. And then like, here's another one. It's hard to get it look like flat like that. But anyway, she finds that really fun. And I think it works well as a way to get into flow state, because it's a little bit challenging to decorate a cookie with royal icing. And she'll find ideas on Pinterest and try and do that. So it's like, you've got a clear goal of what you're doing, but it's creative, and it's a random one. It's not really my thing, but maybe it's your thing, you know? I think even like pottery, I will say for me, like DIY projects are really fun. Like, I don't know why, but I just think they're so fun and like rewarding. When my dad and I did the DIY bathroom renovation in Palm Springs, that was like the most fun I've had there, because it was just so fun for some reason to like work on this project every day. It was like I was learning, so it was challenging. Like, I didn't know really how to do this stuff. And it was fun to see it all come together in the way that I wanted. Like, putting the tile on was so exciting for me. I was like, oh my gosh, but it's a repetitive task, and like I really got into the flow of it, and it was just a lot of fun. More fun than just hanging out by the pool. So for a lot of people, a project of some kinds, like a creative project, DIY, I know people get into like woodworking and stuff like that. Anyway, so more activities where you can get flow, everyday tasks like cooking and cleaning, organizing. I feel like organizing, I get really into flow. It's almost like more of a challenging version of cleaning. And I think that's why it's so fun. And it's just rewarding at the end. And I think with the everyday tasks, it's not quite flow. I feel like it is though for me, because I have fun with it. And that's like the whole point. But with the everyday ones like that, I'm usually listening to some kind of audio at the same time, like music or a podcast or something, because it's really only using one part of your brain. It's like kind of autopilot, like a physical task. So I honestly feel more in a flow state when I'm listening to a podcast while doing that. Although you could argue then that's not truly flow, because you're not like fully in the moment. Another one, gardening. I think if I could have a garden, I would totally do that. People definitely get into flow state from that. And it's just very therapeutic. Even in the Martha Stewart documentary, I remember she says, if you want to be happy for a year, get married. If you want to be happy for 10 years, get a dog. If you want to be happy for a lifetime, plant a garden. And it's like so true. I imagine the flow state you get when from every step, I bet, like planting, pruning the stuff, and it's like fulfilling along the way, like harvesting whatever, and then cooking with it. Like, it just, I want to have a garden one day. It actually sounds so fun. Another flow state I think people get in is with video games. I mean, video games is kind of like the crack of flow, because it's all gamified and hijacking your brain basically to get into flow, to be in the moment. And I mean, how you spend your time's up to you. I feel like video games maybe aren't like the best way to get into flow state, because it's, you know, some people say video games are a waste of time. I'm not here to judge how you spend your time. Monica's gotten really into Fortnite, which I think is funny, but we all need to relax. And if that brings you relaxation that you need and like an escape from work or whatever, then who am I to judge? You know, it's no better than scrolling on TikTok. So it's probably better actually than scrolling on TikTok. Another way that I've experienced flow, this is like kind of an unconventional one, is interior design. And graphic design, which would, for me, with the interior design, it's planning a room. I'll take a photo of a room and then I'll Photoshop the stuff I want into it. And it's so fun. I could do that for hours and get lost in it. And I do think it's kind of a flow state, because I just get so into it, like more than video editing probably. And then putting the stuff together, like I just find that to be really, really entertaining. And graphic design too. I remember years ago, that was probably like one of the first kind of like flow states I experienced on my computer. I would make these little MySpace layouts and would make the backgrounds for them and like code it together. But the graphic design part was really fun. Like making the layouts, each layout site, if you guys remember this, would have like a profile picture and you would edit the shit out of that profile picture to look really cool. And I would spend hours doing that and it'd be so fun. Really any kind of like creative activity where you're not doing it for work, like you're just doing it for fun. I'll get into a flow state with graphic design of the text in my videos. You can optimize for flow within a project as well, because I find, for example, with video editing, sometimes for me it's hard to get into flow and I have to break up the steps. So if I'm trying to just attack the whole thing at once and find music at the same time as text and rough cutting, it can be a little bit overwhelming. If I just decide to rough cut everything and then come up with what I want for all the voiceovers and then pick all the music last and the title cards like right before that, I think I get into more of a flow because I'm focusing on one task at a time rather than context switching within the task. Like with video editing, it's like if you're going from picking text to picking the video clip to picking music, even within this one task of video editing, that's kind of a lot of context switching that might take you out of flow. Sometimes though it doesn't, because I'll be like really onto something. I'll be like, whoa, wait, I need to find the perfect song for this part right now. But other times, like not so much. It kind of depends on the day with that one. But you might experience the same thing with your work as well if it's creative work. Overall, I think flow, it's just important to try and optimize for it because you just will enjoy your life more. Sure, you might be more productive too. I feel like for me, that's not really the point. It's just to enjoy it more. The times where I'm trying to work and I don't ever get into flow, I find it's like stressful. Like if I'm editing and I don't put my phone on do not disturb, and sometimes I literally need to put it in the other room, because you know when you'll have it on do not disturb but you still have the urge to check it and like look, like if you put it in a different room you actually will not have that anymore. It's kind of life-changing. But I find those times where I'm constantly interrupted with an email or a phone call or whatever, like I never get into flow. I'm annoyed like all day. I'm spending the whole day like stressed kind of for no reason. I could just put it on do not disturb, get into the editing, and then later deal with all the other communication stuff and not be as stressed out doing that too, because I feel good about the fact that like, oh, I got a lot done, you know, and it was fun and I like what I did. So yeah, I encourage you to intentionally try and work more flow state time into your life, into your day if you can during work. It can make you even more productive. But if you can't during work, just in your personal life with your friends, doing activities with your friends is even more fun. It makes for way more fun memories than just going and getting dinner, which can be fun too, but it's just a whole different experience if you decide to go take a pottery class or like everyone cooks together or grilling or something like that. You know, it's fine to go on your phone from time to time, but I feel like it's not that fun. Let's be real. It's like you're trying to escape boredom. You're getting like a cheap hit of dopamine. It's just not that memorable or really fun. Then last time I was in Palm Springs, I noticed Monica and I were doing that a lot. Like we go in the hot tub, we just kind of like go on our phones. We weren't really like having that fun of a time. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell her I want to go to the driving range with her because she's super into golf. I don't care for it as much, but I was like, let's just go. And I kind of did get into the flow state with it because she gave me some feedback. Like Monica gave me some tips, some things to focus on. And I got enough golf balls to like really hit for, you know, a good like 30 minutes. And it was just more fun, more memorable, more like fulfilling of a day. I don't know. I feel like it makes me less stressed about reaching goals. Like I'm working towards my goals and whatnot, but I'm having fun along the way too. It's not like I'm completely sacrificing my entire life to get to a certain financial goal or whatever. Like you can have fun along the way as well. I'm a big believer in balance. The last thing I want to touch on with flow state, I might have already about the Pomodoro technique thing, but I still use the Pomodoro technique at times. And I just wanted to talk about that for a second. I use it more in the afternoon or the evening when my brain's a little fried, when I've already done the most important deep work type task. And just for tasks that honestly don't take that long. Like cleaning my apartment, just tidying it up, doesn't really take more than 25 minutes a lot of the time. So I'll usually just set a little 25-minute timer, or checking the mail, like dealing with that, replying to emails. A lot of that stuff doesn't take that long. And it's also maybe not the most fun. So I like that 5-minute break incentive in there to do it. Like cleaning out my car, running little random errands, stuff like that. That's everything about flow that I wanted to touch on. I really wanted to talk about it because I feel like it just makes my life better, and it can make your life better too if you find ways to incorporate it more into your life. And you can read the book about flow if you're more interested in it. I'll link it in the show notes, and also the talk that Mihail did. You can listen to that too. It's kind of like a podcast. You don't really need to overthink it. I know there's a lot of steps like, oh, immediate feedback, like what? I mean, you'll figure it out. Like if you're not getting into flow, it's probably because you're missing a step. And these things are just to help you get there. But certain things are really made to get into flow, like sports, for example, games, like board games even. I mean, there's so many things, really. It's endless how many things you can like kind of get into that flow state with. I've heard some people even with road trips they get into flow. I don't. I find that very boring. I don't know, maybe if you love driving and love cars and you're on like the 101 like Pacific Coast or whatever. I don't know, maybe. For some people. For everyone, it's a little bit different. Like some things I'm just not going to really probably get as much into flow with. You might not with things that I enjoy. It's kind of different for everyone. But the point is trying to optimize your life for the things that kind of get you into that, because it just will be more enjoyable, and trying to find ways where you can do that with other people, because it really does enhance the experience as well. So yeah, that is this episode. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Comment down below if you're on the YouTube video. If there's something that really gets you into flow state, I'm curious to know what it is for you. Or if there's something that you're going to try because you listened to this episode, comment down below what it is. I'd love to hear. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye.